Howdy, everyone. So, I didn't want to leave you hanging, but we're having another slight technical difficulty. It's been a special week, but I'm very excited to bring you this interview with Krystal. And while we're waiting, I thought it would be fun to show you some of the stuff that we have in store for you because I always pull up a bunch of tabs before our interviews just to make sure that we have cool stuff to look at and talk about. So, one thing that I love about Wildgrid Solar, today's guest is Krystal of Wildgrid. Um, One thing that I love about them is specifically on Instagram, they have all these really cool videos that they publish teaching you about basically how solar energy works for in different ways, including like if you're a renter, if you're a person who lives in a house, depending on the amounts of control that you may have over your ability to install solar panels and stuff. And they're constantly sharing news about clean technologies, uh, more renewable energy sources and things like that. So definitely go check out Wildgrid Solar on Instagram, which is the one that I didn't link yet in the description below. And I think that's a great way to kill a few minutes while we wait for Krystal to catch up. She's in New York at Climate Week, so I'm honestly really impressed that she's going to be coming here. But excited, of course. We've had Krystal on the show before, and I want to. I've got that linked in the description for you as well. Yeah. Roman, yes. Uh, just if you could only see my computer, you would probably cry, honestly. There's always about 80 million tabs up. That's just how it is. So, go check out Wildgrid Solar on Instagram, and we will make sure that we get this up and rolling for you soon. And just in case you're looking for the previous video interview that we did with Krystal, it is called Windows Solar Charger featuring Krystal Persaud. And we did it for Fundum Friday a couple of 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Wow. Incredible. So we're going to be talking with Krystal in just a few minutes here. We tried to do it on our usual Tuesday time, but illnesses on both ends, unfortunately. I just got my booster shot and slept for about 3 days straight, which I'm very excited about. But yeah, so our previous interview is linked below, and Wildgrid Solar on Instagram is not linked below, but I really recommend going and checking them out, giving them a follow. Oh, I'm on Hackster's account, so I don't follow them yet. I'm gonna do it. Ha ha ha. But they just share so much good information, and it's a great way to kill a few minutes while we wait for everything to get synced up here. Time is an illusion. Very true. It has been over the last 2 years. Ain't that the truth, though? I'm just gonna pull up one of these. I don't think I can hear this through my show headphones, but I watch pretty much every one of them as they come up on my personal account. There's just so much good stuff. They do like plant swaps. If you're in New York, they all do all kinds of cool events and stuff. And I can't wait to introduce you to Krystal again, just because she does so much cool stuff. And as mentioned, she's in New York for Climate Week right now, which is contributing to all of the stuff that we have going on with tech issues right now. But I wanted to start the stream just to make sure that we're up and running, ready to go as soon as that's all set up. So Wildgrid Solar is actually a Krystal's second company. Might even be more than that. I'm not sure. But check out this sweet website. Her previous one is Grouphug Tech, which is this cool Windows solar charger that got featured in a bajillion like magazines and People magazine and on Goop and on Shark Tank, which we'll talk about that in the interview in a minute. You can still buy them. They're going strong. They're very beautiful. A great gift. I've gotten my parents a couple of these, maybe one of them. And then her new one is Wildgrid, which is new since the last time we talked together. So I'm really excited to actually dig into that. There's some really interesting stuff about funding as well. So Krystal's previous venture, Grouphug Solar, was founded apparently, or not founded, but partly funded by Mark Cuban off of Shark Tank. And but they also did a Kickstarter, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, I'm very interested in the idea of maybe someday having my own little, hardware company of my own, little baby hardware company, and ideally making it as sustainable as possible. And so I think there's a lot to learn from Krystal, and also I'm curious about like her funding models, Did she stay the same? Did she take any more venture funding? Did she go the crowdfunding route? What's the pros and cons of each one? Oh boy. As a techie who has taken to van life while working remotely, all this solar talk is super relevant for me. Yes, also that. Lots of people doing the nomad life thing. If I've honestly thought about it a lot myself, and knowing more about what my options would be is very attractive. Also, apparently, if you run a business out of a van, then you can discount like 30% of it or something on your taxes, write it off as a business expense. If y'all ever want to have a session or two talking about just straight up maker business, well, I shouldn't say that because I'm already like chatting with some people about that. But yeah, we should. I'm very interested in featuring that stuff on the channel, so that's partly why I've got Krystal on here because she's a badass. And while we're waiting, you should all again, Hackster wasn't following them. As you may not have guessed, I do have personal accounts that I follow Krystal in all the places, including on LinkedIn, where she shares lots of cool news and stuff. And so you should go follow those, but I don't necessarily have them followed by Hackster. Yes, Jay, that is exactly, that's one of my own conflicts as well. The nomad life sounds really alluring, and I love the idea of like living in a van and being able to go around, and travel around and keep doing video and stuff. But yeah, a van is not a great place to have like, a glow forge or a 3D printer or even my CNC sewing machine. I love my CNC embroidery machine. It lets me tailor stuff, which is great for keeping, clothes out of the landfill. I can get stuff secondhand and not contribute to fast fashion and tailor it to my size, and then it doesn't go in a landfill or whatever. Turn old clothes into other stuff. If it's like made of merino and it's still good, but it's got some holes in it, you can turn it into arm warmers or whatever. Um, kind of stuff that it's hard to have space for in a van. I know we're going a little bit off topic, but I think it's fun to kind of chat about this stuff while we wait for Krystal. No shade to Krystal, as I mentioned. I'm gonna keep saying this. She's at New York Climate Week. She's doing all kinds of cool stuff. I'm amazed that she's making the time for us and very grateful. Yes, this is another point. As Jay was mentioning, you need a big lab for the nomad life. It's hard to do that. You could just work in maker spaces around the world, depending on where you're going. If I wanted to go to Phoenix, I could go to Heatsink Labs. If I wanted to go to LA, I could go to Crash Space or another one of the local ones. What's the one that Alan Pan founded? Burbank Makerspace, maybe? And there's all kinds of stuff down there. Ann Arbor has all hands active. There's all these maker spaces you could go to get your fix. And Krystal is here. I'm so excited. Everybody, check it out.
I like when I opened StreamYard, it was being weird, and I was like, I'm not emailing Alex
It's
again.
always being weird. No worries. Yay, Krystal! Hey everybody,
How are
Krystal's here.
you?
I'm so excited. I've been telling people about how you're in New York for Climate Week, and you've got like so much stuff going on, and I'm really excited to hear about it. And like, no
Yes.
worries at all. I'm just happy that you could come and
Oh
join
my
us
gosh.
here.
Yeah, and how are
Everyone's
you doing,
excited to see
by
you.
the way?
How am I doing?
Yeah.
I am doing okay. I feel a lot more alive today. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I was honestly kind of relieved that I guess for context, my daughter was just sick and I had been emailing Alex and then I didn't hear back and then you had just gotten your booster and I was like, good, we were both just out of it.
Yeah, I slept through yesterday's alarm. So if we had had the session, I would have been 15 minutes late myself and it would have canceled it automatically. It's been a week.
Oh
But
my gosh.
yay.
Really.
Um so tell us about okay, so first, could you introduce yourself? I've been telling people about you and stuff, but let's hear in your own words what
I
you're
also
dealing with.
wait, I'm gonna grab a
Okay.
solar panel really, really quickly.
Yes.
I had one ready.
Glorious.
but I wanted to make sure I got to talk about.
Yay!
But yeah, so my background, hi everyone, I am Krystal. I'm an industrial designer, sort of maker by training, turned solar panel designer into sort of climate tech entrepreneur. I used to be the head of product design at Little Bits, an educational tech maker company, and then left to start my own company called Grouphug, where we make and design solar panels that can hang in your window. That are really pretty, made out of bamboo. Alex and I actually talked about this when we first launched a couple of years ago. And then I just recently, yep, there we go.
There we
Just
go.
recently this year launched another climate company called Wildgrid that helps connect people to solar providers and community solar farms in their area. And that was really a response from people from Grouphug asking me like, "Hey, I bought your panel. That's cool. I want rooftop solar. I want community solar. I want to go solar in a bigger way." And we put
Yes.
together resources to actually connect people to do that. So I'm just like a solar maker, climate lady. That's me.
Amazing. And I've been showing people how amazing your Instagram is, honestly, for Wildgrid. You're constantly sharing, your whole team is always sharing these really interesting little snippets of news and information and FAQs about how to go solar. Like, if someone's like approaches you on the street about community solar, like, is it a scam? What's the deal? And stuff
Yeah.
like that.
I mean, I think, coming from the more maker community with Little Bits, I think you forget how technical some of this stuff can really be. And because like you and I are just used to making stuff, we like the complexity. Like that's part of what
Mm.
attracted me to solar is I was like, oh, this is confusing. I want to get more into it. Like, oh, this is exciting. Like I want to figure it out. But for the most people, they're like, oh, this is confusing. Pass. Like I'm out. So we try to really focus on like really good, clear communication that's fun and easy to understand because I think there's this layer of just making something easy that prevents people from even taking that first step.
Yeah, and you do a great job of translating that stuff and breaking it down so that everyday people can kind of understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the goal.
So what are all the different components of what you do at WildGrid? You educate people, you connect people. How do you connect people with community solar and other resources? So you can sign up if you're a renter, you can sign up if you're a homeowner. What do people get when they sign up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've tried to make it really easy. The sign up process really easy. So when you make an account, you take a little quiz that basically you tell us like, are you a renter? Are you an owner? Where do you live? What are you interested in? Um, I actually right now the sign up is only live for people who live in New York. Otherwise, you're on a wait list, Alex. Otherwise, I would say totally
Aha.
sign up. There we do make it really fun and geared for Gen Z and millennials. Like the best thing I think I've designed in a while is that there's a SpongeBob GIF in our flow of signing up for solar, which I was like, why not? Like, why not make it a SpongeBob? But after you tell us a little bit about yourself, we'll use our network of providers and options, and basically personalize a little menu set for what you can do. So if you're a renter and this is your budget, etc., hey, here's 3 solar farms in your area. If you sign up for a solar farm, you'll get 10% off your utility bill, and you actually don't need to call your landlord. You don't need to do anything. Like this is how it works. And you can always email or text Wildgrid and we'll answer your questions. So we act as that like neutral educational third party where you don't have to worry about us trying to sell you on something because we've pre-vetted the best farms for you. Because unfortunately, I think because it's new, solar is kind of a sketchy place right now. And it's those guys at the farmers markets don't do anyone any favors because I think people get so turned off by how I don't know, unsavory it seems. I don't know how to describe it. Like it's like you take something as like pure and amazing as solar and then just make it feel so dirty, unfortunately. And we're trying to erase that.
Amazing. So do you mind if I ask, what is your business model? Are you working with the companies to connect them and then they sort of compensate you for that, or?
Yeah. So we do. So we have an application process for farms and providers that if they want access to like our community who's interested in solar, they have to apply. They submit the products they have, like the solar products, the inverters, the warranties, everything. Their customer service reviews, we read them. So it really is a high bar to make it on the platform. And then after that, every time someone connects with them and actually signs a solar contract, we get an affiliate commission, basically.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So, bringing it back to sort of the connection with what you were doing previously, I started this site, Green EE, and I'm not going to link to it right now, but it basically helping people understand how to build electronics more sustainably. And part of that was I talked about renewable energy, and I got comments about that being like, okay, well, yes, it's all well and good to build stuff that like helps you use solar to power your individual electronics, but what's better and what we should be doing is what you're doing with Wildgrid basically is like making sure that the whole grid is powered off of solar rather than like producing more individual things. And I'm
Yeah.
curious because you're sort of doing both, and I like to think that there's value in doing it on the small scale, but what's your perspective on that?
Yes, actually love that you asked that question because I feel like as a designer slash like business owner, I had a real reckoning with Grouphug, with the company that makes these, maybe like about a year ago, just thinking exactly what you just said. Like I'm helping people in this really, really small scale way. I don't know if I mentioned there's like USB ports on the bottom so people can charge their phone and devices with solar through their window. But like you said, on the bigger scheme, like thousands of Windows solar chargers is great, but it's not actually going to make a huge difference when you look at lowering our emissions. And that was really like kind of a gut wrenching realization for me that selling and making products and is really fun and empowering. And I think has, if you think about like gamification and toy design, which is my background with little bits, you want to design these experiences that are really fun and easy wins for people to make them want to keep going. And that's sort of how
Mhm.
I feel about Grouphug is you get a solar panel, it's probably your first one, you hang into the window, it works, and you're like, oh shit, I just use solar, what else can I do? And I think that's a really powerful thing. But I that problem of what else can you do was really eating at me. And that was why I also started Wildgrid, because I just wanted to clear that gap for people that you can do something small, but that's a great first step. Don't stop there.
I love it. It's almost like an entry point for people who are like, ah, and it's like you can hit a button and get that immediate hit that like I'm on the way, because sometimes we get so paralyzed by this idea that like, everything's screwed and I have no power as an individual to change anything. And you're not
Yeah,
like just sort of giving people something so that they like feel better about themselves, but also it really sort of helps guide them. I
it
think
does.
it's a
And
beautiful.
you really need that. And I think I hate like I think some people get really spiraled into like climate doom, which I
Mhm.
understand and I feel like that sometimes. But sometimes there's this binary of like the whole grid has to be renewable and electric, otherwise it's not worth it. And it's like, no, actually every tiny percentage we push to be more renewable and resilient is worth it. So getting people on a path to do that, I think is important. And it's almost like when you think about other habits that you take. I personally am not a runner, but I've heard this analogy. My husband runs, is like, you don't start running your first day and run a marathon, right? You might jog like half a mile or a mile, and it's the same kind of thing. Like you're building these habits and this like mental model of like, this is my road to being the sustainable person I want to be. And you're not going to start by changing your whole grid, unfortunately. Maybe one day that will be very easy, but for now it takes a lot of little steps.
Yeah, so like I will meditate for 2 minutes a day, kind of first step kind of thing that gets you out of that paralysis and into the hope
Yeah.
side of it, maybe.
And there's so many little things. Like I think even making someone actually texted me today. I'll have to email this to you. A solar panel, a solar cell actually in the shape of a butterfly that I think someone laser cut. And it was so
Ah,
beautiful. It was so beautiful. It was beautiful. And in reality, it's probably like, half a volt, and that won't do a whole lot, but it really like I think inspires the creativity and thought in people, and like that type of maker art is needed as well. Otherwise, someone might never look at it. Oh, solar cat.
we gotta bring this up. You're
Yes.
talking about solar art. I think we talked about this last time too, but it's evergreen. Ever
Yeah.
blue?
Ever,
It's just so
yeah,
good.
ever
Um,
mono, ever monocrystalline. So I was actually just reflecting on this because it's been almost 3 years since I made
mhm.
that. And I actually made this solar cat before I made this, which a lot of people don't know because Grouphug just
I
ended
didn't
up
know
becoming,
that.
it ended up becoming a bigger thing than I thought it would be. I just realized my humidifier is like in the background. Sorry, guys. There it is. But yeah, I think coming off of the way SolarCat came about is I had just left my job at Little Bits, where I basically designed electronic toys all day, and I applied to be a designer in residence at the New York Hall of Science, amazing science museum in New York. They used to host the World Maker Faire every year. I don't know if they still do.
Oh yeah.
You've probably been there. Like if you've ever been, it's like that
Mhm.
giant museum.
It's an
But
amazing museum.
it's an amazing museum. I just left Little Bits. I got a designer in residency at NISI. The the residency program was really fun because they basically give you resources to design an exhibit. And I didn't know what I was gonna do. I was just kind of like, I don't have a job. I'm gonna do this. And I got there and you get like assigned a space and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting. Like this is a cool window. It's sunny. Like I'm interested in climate. Maybe I'll try to make a solar panel." And because it's a kids museum, it evolved into this very whimsical exhibit of a cat-shaped solar panel. It meows, it lights up. It's really fun. There's a little pedestal that's powered by the actual cat and it's totally off grid. It was really fun to make. And then that just got me thinking like, oh, like you can make solar in any shape and like why aren't more people doing this? And just because something is shaped like a cat doesn't mean it's not educational and not making a difference. And then that really just launched me into, whoa, how else can I use design to make this field more interesting and fun? Because I think that will get more people excited about it.
That's another thing I wanted to ask you about. So back when all the Roe v. Wade stuff went down, you made one in the shape of a uterus, and with the Solar Cat and this one, which is amazing. You know, do they work when you? Because I've only usually seen solar cells in you sort of a square or like a circle thing that's got a square inside of it, or like the corners cut off, or yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I'm gonna show you. My group hug designer just actually slacked me a picture, which is not even on Instagram yet. I'll show it to
Oh,
you. We're working on can you see that? It's like
oh
uterus
yeah.
panels. So this will go into a frame with like tubes and like it's gonna look similar to Solar Cat, how there's that yellow cat frame. It's gonna have like a uterus shaped wooden frame that panel sits into with
Huh.
a USB port and everything. It's super fun. But yeah, so technically solar cells. We use sun power solar cells. I guess they're called Maxion now. Personally,
Hmm.
I think they're one of the best cells on the market because they're monocrystalline, really matte, really beautiful. They have a conductive backsheet on them so that if they bend or crack electronically, they still work. So if you've ever worked with solar cells, they're
Mm.
very fragile, very fragile. Like you can like I've pushed on my soldering iron and cracked them and like ruined a whole thing just because
Oh no.
they're wafer thin, like they're very fragile. So that's what I like about SunPower Maxion cells. Depending on the cell, what we do is we actually buy whole cells, so they have like the corner chafer. The way that those cells work on the back is they have connector points that are sort of in parallels. So if you cut the cell, but if you don't get in between those connector points, the cell is actually still functional. So but depending on the solar brand, you can get creative with how you cut up those cells. So like we tend to cut them in stripes, and then having a stripe is a more flexible building block for different shapes than the big chunky square.
Makes sense. And
Yeah.
how do you cut them without them shattering?
You can it is difficult.
I'm
Honestly,
asking
it's
for all your
difficult.
secrets here.
No. It's very difficult to do without the right equipment. Like we actually work with solar factories to help us do these things at scale. Because if I were
Mhm.
to sit down and do them, like my breakage rate would be like 30 to 50% because it's very hard. So you can score and break them, which is risky. You can laser cut them on a like laser cutter that can cut metal. It is, it takes a couple passes and like you have to be careful with stuff like that. But those are really like the two ways I've done it successfully. I think laser cutting is really exciting. Like that's how that artist cut one in the shape of a butterfly. But you do have to be careful because of the conductive backsheet. If you're cutting across like a positive negative connection, that cell's not going to work anymore. So you have to get kind of creative with how you cut them. I love these questions. No one ever asked stuff like this.
Oh, it's because I spend too much time following all your social media accounts because there's some cool stuff on there. I sound like a total creep, but it's fine. It's for a good cause.
Please ask. We've also experimented with painting cells. Like that's a thing you can do. They tend to be that blue black color because they're the most efficient way to like absorb and attract sunlight. So the lighter the color, the more sunlight you're going to reflect. But depending on what you are looking for in terms of efficiency, you could actually color some of them and things like that.
Awesome. So, speaking of stalking the social media and stuff, I say that, but like honestly, I like to do my research before I do an interview and stuff. But so I did a little extra digging on your LinkedIn page, and I found out that I didn't realize that you had gotten investment from Mark Cuban in Grouphug. And I realized that, or I promised people beforehand, I said that this was one of the things that I was curious to ask you about because I know that you also did a Kickstarter, and I'm really curious about, you're on your second company now. Second or?
Second, yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I don't know if you like secret companies, how much of an overachiever you are in a good way.
No, two is more than enough.
Well, you're getting plenty. But yeah, so I'm really interested in like, so you went with some VC funding. Did you do the Kickstarter before that or after? And like, how did that work out for you? And what would you choose to do again with a hardware company?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So obviously hardware is so now like, Grouphug is a hardware company. Wildgrid is very much a software company in very different cases and different processes. I think I started in hardware, so I think I'll always love it, but it is sort of it is at times, especially in a climate like today with the supply chain shortages and everything, it's a masochistic pursuit at times.
That's a good way of putting it.
To try to get all the parts you need together at the right pricing that you need. But at the end of the day, I do think there's nothing like building something physical and holding it. I think like I will always love that process. That didn't answer your question. The timeline was I started a Kickstarter first because I thought this was like an interesting product idea, and I sort of made it for myself first because I used to live in Brooklyn. I rented and I was like, I want to do solar. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to build a solar panel. And it got to a point where friends were just like, that's cool. I like that panel in your window. Will you make me one? So I would just make them. But then I was like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder if this could become a company. So I did the Kickstarter. We did raise over $70,000, which was great. And it was about 500 orders. So we could scale a bit and be able to work with a small factory at that point to help us fulfill and make all those orders. A fun fact is that Shark Tank producers actually troll Kickstarter for companies. Huh. So like, a couple of months after the Kickstarter, somebody like emailed me and was like, I saw your video. You look like you'd be good on Shark Tank. They watch the videos. So if you're ever doing a Kickstarter, be really charismatic in your Kickstarter video because a producer could see you. But yeah, a producer saw my video, reached out, asked if I was interested. It honestly was like very early for us as a company to be on Shark Tank, but it was the kind of thing where I was like, YOLO, I'll just say yes and see what happens. And then I happened to make it all the way through the process to a point where I got to pitch on the show. Yeah. And then, got to deal with Mark Cuban. He and his team are really supportive. Like I have his direct email. We email, I ask him questions. I think one of the greatest things about Shark Tank is that every shark has a team. So like he has a team of accountants and lawyers and people. And anytime like we hit a hiccup, I could email and just say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this thing. Can somebody on your team help me? So it's not like Mark Cuban every time is directly helping me, but his team is so great. And that has been a great support network.
That's really cool. And it's interesting because that's something that they mentioned in this article here where they were like, "Oh, you're a bit early because you hadn't like actually delivered anything yet." But that's because they were scouting you.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't apply. I was just like, I don't think it was even on my, obviously I'd watched the show, but it wasn't like on my list of things to do. It was like they were like, "Do you want to come?" And I feel like I was just like, "Yes." I feel like I should just say yes. Yes, I'll come.
Love it.
And then it was literally like, "Okay, like fly to LA on this day with all your shit." And I was like, "Okay." And I just like did it, not knowing exactly what would happen, but it was really great. And I think, based on what we talked about of me kind of realizing that like Grouphug making small solar devices at scale isn't really what I want to do, because I am interested in those bigger targets of helping people make bigger changes. However, I do think small products are a way to get people there. But in terms of investment, we didn't accept any other VC funding for Grouphug and have just been growing it based on orders and profits, because I think that's sort of the right thing to do for
Mhm.
that type of company. Like if it's the kind of thing where like even if it got to a point where I was doing some like spreadsheet work, and I was like, if we got X amount of money in investment, like another $100,000 in investment, and I used that to buy Grouphug inventory, would that be well spent, or should I just give someone else $100,000 to install solar panels? And like when you look at the actual like emissions metrics, I was like, I feel like I'm putting money in the wrong place. And I feel like that might, I don't know. I feel like as an entrepreneur, I kind of tell myself like there are so many paths to making things work. But when I thought about, what I wanted to really push out, I was like, I don't know if I want to make millions of chargers. I don't know if that's what people need. So how can I figure out how to help people in a different way? So I sort of run Grouphug now as like a design studio, and we just make cool products and shapes. And sometimes we make 10 of them, and that's it.
I love that. And it's a good point about you do have these other things here too. Um this part about if you got extra funding, what would it go to and stuff. It's sort of ties into this fixation of, constantly creating more money, but is that the same thing as value? And when your value, ideal of value is about actually making a difference, then, having it be something that, well, it provides for the people who want to provide, it gives jobs to the people who, they can keep their jobs working in a good industry, the people who want these can get them, but also
Yeah.
like you're not just trying to like generate more money because I
Yeah.
think that's an amazing standpoint on there.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like, part of if you start a business or a project, like part of it is inevitably driven a little bit by ego. Like I thought I could do this and I can do it. You know what I mean? And part of me is like, I want to sell millions of chargers. And then I was like, am I doing this just for my own ego, or do I actually think it's going to help people reduce their emissions? And then I was like, oh, like that doesn't sit well. Like that doesn't make sense, honestly. But there's another way that I can use what I've learned to help people make that bigger step. So that was sort of the shift of why Wildgrid started, honestly.
I love it. Are there other companies that have kind of inspired you with a similar approach where it seems to be less about just like generating profits for a small group of people and more about creating real value? Like, who do
That
you look up
is
to?
such a good question. I mean, honestly, I feel like not enough people do that, because when you accept VC money, there is that expectation that you're gonna like grow at whatever costs, and I think that drives a lot of decision making just to profits. Which is honestly what I liked about being on Shark Tank, is that it's much more. Obviously Mark Cuban is a huge impressive investor, but he really treats his Shark Tank companies as more of a family where he wants to help, and he doesn't dictate to me how much he wants me to grow. He's like there to answer questions. So I think that was like a best case scenario for Grouphug. One company that comes to mind, which I am very biased because it was founded by a friend of mine, but I really admire what they're doing. It's called Generation Conscious, and it's a company that is making like zero waste, plastic free detergent, toothpaste tablets, like a number of other products, they're working really hard to get all of their products made in the US, which is very difficult. And I super admire them for that. Yeah, generation conscious,
Oh, cool.
exactly.
Look at those vending machines. Love that.
Yeah, and they're really thinking about every part of the process. So like they instead of doing retail, they'll install vending machines in apartment buildings, in college dorms, in like local community areas. It's really smart and very, very cool.
Love this.
Yeah,
This is so cool.
super cool.
You
So
see
like
a lot of
you can just go to you can like find a vending machine, just go get your stuff. You don't have to keep going to the store and buying it, and it's very cool.
yeah, I see these things for like you were saying toothpaste tablets and stuff, but they still get to ship to you in like a bottle or whatever. But with a vending machine, they can ship them and like do the packaging on much larger quantities. Pardon. It's like from the idea of like individually packaged things to like packaging for like bulk for one person versus packaging for bulk for a vending machine. It's like it's going one
Yeah.
step further. Love it.
And the thing that I love about what they're doing is it is more community focused, where it is like shifting that, you could have one of these installed in the space that you live. And like it doesn't have to be in a store, and it can be in like a community center or even a library, or like it can be somewhere else where, like stuff like that. It's really smart.
That is really smart. You have another thing going back a minute ago. I have to mention since we're talking about Mark Cuban, it's the same guy, right? Who did this
Yes.
Safe and
Yeah.
Affordable Medications. It seems like a dream match, honestly, between you. And I know that one of the in this article it says, well, one of the other Shark Tankers called them ugly, which I think is ridiculous because obviously like everyone sees these and is like, where can I get one of those?
I know.
But it does seem
That's the
like kind of
Yeah. That's the thing about Shark Tank that I think is so funny is every single judge was very nice. And like you go on the set to pitch, but like there's so much that happens outside of what was taped. So like I had to step out and like do the walk down the Shark Tank hallway and like stand there for like minutes before I actually pitched, because they have to like fix the lighting and like fix the microphone. So I'm just standing. I'm literally just standing there in front of them, like saying nothing. And they were like, "You're gonna do great." Lori complimented my outfit. They were very, very nice. And then as soon as the cameras turn on, they have, they have like their personas that they play up because it's a television show, of course.
yeah, for
So
sure.
after I pitched and got the deal with Mark and the cameras turned off, they were all so nice and they were like, "Great job." Like they're very nice to the entrepreneurs. So it really is TV. It's not like Barbara was very nice afterwards. I don't hold anything against her for calling them ugly.
That's
Obviously, I
really
just
nice. Yeah, they gotta have some. So they can't have them all just being like, "Oh my god, I love it, it's so
yeah,
cool." But also, like,
exactly.
it
Like
does seem like
Mr.
a perfect match,
Wonderful.
though.
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr.
Wonderful.
Wonderful, like, was not very nice to me on air. He wasn't, like, mean, but he wasn't, like, complimentary, but afterwards, he was like, "Great job." So, it's a TV show.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see, what else can we dig into? So, you had a project that you mentioned from like 2011 called CEO for Change, and it seems to tie into this. I don't know, is that a thing that you're still doing at all? It's again, this is something. Sorry, everyone. I kind of like blindsided Krystal with this because, like I said, this is the first time I've kind of like dug into your LinkedIn page, and I'm like, what can I find to like
No,
torture you
go
with?
for it.
So,
Oh my
but it
gosh.
feels
No.
like you're kind of living this. Like you're sort of whether or not you're like consciously doing it under the name of CEO for Change, like it really feels like with the Mark Cuban stuff and like just what you're doing now, it feels like that's what you're doing. I don't know.
Yeah, wow, I haven't thought about that in so long. It's funny because as I think I didn't always know I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but when I look back at my sort of career and trajectory, I was always making these little projects, but I didn't like know what to do with them. I don't know if you feel like
Mm,
so even when I was in college, I was making up these little projects and like these little groups, and they were all kind of prototypes to actually starting a company. I think because I made that CEO for Change, which was basically interviewing and researching top CEOs and like trying to convince them to adopt sustainability practices. And I made
mm.
these. I don't the web. I feel like that Squarespace didn't even exist back then. I don't even know what that was hosted on. That website, probably WordPress. I'm sure that I've let the domain lapse. Otherwise, I would send it to you. But the whole
Yes.
idea was, yeah,
I'm totally torturing you. I'm sorry. I could have checked
totally.
that
No,
beforehand and
no,
made sure
no.
that.
But the whole idea was like, creating this, like, I guess, educational movement around like how people could make these decision makers. And it culminated in a gallery show where we had like an event. This was when I was in college, or right after college. And then I just kind of like stopped working on it. And I think looking back, I didn't like have the tools. Like, I didn't know how to start a company, but I knew that I wanted to do this thing and I had to do something. So I made a project. And I think now I'm much more conscious of like, oh, I want to do this thing. Do I have time to do it? Is it a side project? Is it a hobby? Is it a company? And now, Grouphug and Wildgrid turned into companies, but they all kind of started with this curiosity. So I do have a lot of like random projects that never really went anywhere, just because I was like trying to figure something out.
But it feels like they kind of did go somewhere, because like it's all part of your arc. Like there's this very consistent
Weird.
line of like,
I feel
this
like,
is what we should
Alex,
be.
tell me my story, because I feel like I've never actually looked back and been like, that made sense. I was like, oh, that was a thing I did for like a couple months and then dropped it. But I guess, yeah, I did kind of do it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of like I feel kind of similar about my own story, where there's no you couldn't like look at the past and foresee the future, but you look back and you're like, oh, that makes sense. You were always thinking about this one thing. You were always sort of thinking about sustainability, and like how do you bring the change at a high level,
Yeah, yeah,
not just on the individual
totally.
scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to Wildgrid, what do you think? You've mentioned that it sort of makes it more approachable for people who may have this like climate doom mindset, which I totally understand. Sometimes we all go there, but else do you think sort of stops people from adopting solar? What kind of roadblocks do you see in people's ways? It's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think like honestly, to me, the main two are just awareness and education about what your options are. So if I think the most obvious, you know, commercial for solar that people picture is you have to own a house, you have to have like 20 grand of extra cash in your bank account to do that, to do like an on rooftop solar installation, which was very true like 20 years ago and is not true now. Most solar companies have financing options where you can pay $0 down or do a small down payment and then have a monthly payment after that. So it becomes more accessible. You actually don't need to be a homeowner to engage with solar energy. There are great community solar programs, which basically mean that you don't own your property or your roof space, but you can help support solar in your area by subscribing to a solar farm that is built somewhere in your area. And then for supporting that, you actually get 10% off your electric bill, because there are always incentives that trickle down. And I think that's the second thing that most people don't know, is that when someone goes solar, there is pretty much always a financial model that is going to save them money. So like, you should never be paying more to go solar, because you should save eventually. So like, if you're installing solar in your rooftop, you should get a system size that makes sense for you, so that the monthly payments are doable and that you're going to see an ROI within like 5 to 10 years. If that's not the case, then maybe your electric bill was too low. Honestly, that's what I see sometimes. People have
Wow.
like very, very low electric bills, and it just means that you don't use a lot of energy. So the cost of solar might not make sense for you, and that's like disappointing, but sometimes the truth. That's why a lot of companies, like Target is one of the biggest solar installers, because they have massive stores and warehouses that take a ton of energy, so they can save a ton of money. So I think that's sort of like the disappointing answer, is that it might not be the best solution. Rooftop solar might not be the best solution for you if you don't have a high bill. That's where community solar is a great option, because you're always saving. Those farmers markets guys always piss me off, because they sell what is like an ESCO program, an energy service company. What that
Hmm.
means, ESCOs they kind of sell what, this is maybe too detailed, but they sell what are called renewable energy credits, RECs, which are, you can kind of think of them like the carbon offset of the energy world, where a renewable energy credit is generated for every so much renewable energy that goes onto the grid from like a renewable energy plant. What like a Green Mountain Energy does is actually sells you those renewable energy credits, but those credits could come from anywhere. So you could be, you're paying more to support energy on the grid, but like that energy could have been created in like California and you live in New York. It's just like balancing it out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Which better than nothing. However, I really don't think you should ever pay more because someone in that chain is saving money and it's not you. Like you're supporting it somewhere else. So if you have a community farm, that's always the best way to get local because you can go visit it. You know, you can meet the other people on the farm. It's very, very cool.
It really feels a lot like community-supported agriculture, actually, like a CSA, but for energy, where like you're saving some money, you're supporting local things, and you subscribe monthly. It's like instead of getting a box of produce shipped to you from like the farm down the road, instead you're getting like a box of solar like that you're using in your house,
It's
and you get
it's
like
really yeah, it's really, really great, and, like, the solar farms could be installed on fields, they could be installed on rooftops, like, it's super it's really great, and you don't have to be an owner, it's a really accessible way to support more solar energy on the grid.
and one of the cool things about, these farms is that they actually can coexist. You're not, like, taking away space from agriculture, you can actually share that space with other
Yeah.
organisms, like sheep.
Yeah, like
It's so
sheep, like
cute.
sheep. Solar farm owners, like the ones who actually develop the land, will hire companies like with sheep and goats to mow the lawn and grass of the
Oh,
field.
yeah.
Super funny. We actually did a webinar with one of them. We'll have to post that. And then we did a video on Wildgrid the other week where a broccoli farmer put some solar panels over some of his broccoli crop because it needed more shade, and like the broccoli actually turned like a deeper shade of green and was like better. And I was like, what? Like that's crazy.
That is so cool.
So cool. It's
I love
super
it.
cool. It's super, super cool. But yeah, there's all these like bigger like infrastructure like ways to get involved. And I think that's where trying to bridge that gap between the things you can do in your home to how to actually engage with something outside of yourself that has that bigger impact is sort of what like gets me up in the morning, honestly.
Yes. Uh, so we're coming to the end of the amount of time that we have, but before we wrap up, I want to point out that you talked recently about solar punk, which is one of my favorite things. I love solar punk. It's
Oh my
could you
gosh, me
explain
too.
briefly what the deal is with solar punk as we sort of move into the future here?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I every time I explain this, I feel like I sound slightly slightly too I like slightly cultish, like too optimistic, but solar punk is started as a literary movement that's very optimistic and sort of paints this narrative of like what if we tackle and actually like beat climate change, and what if new climate technology like solar panels and wind turbines are married and live harmoniously with local co-ops and farms and agriculture. And I think it's so wonderful, and I think it's so achievable, honestly. And I what I so I like live very much in like the solar tech, climate tech space. And I think a lot of times I'll be in talks or see companies where it's literally just technology. It's like batteries, mining, turbines, this, that. And as you imagine the future and you're like, what does this world look like? It's like all boxes with batteries and servers. Like I don't understand, I don't understand. And then I think there's this other mindset of, the most sustainable way to live is off the grid on a farm, making your own food and your own clothes and all that stuff, which like I doesn't sound good to me. Like, is there something in between where we, can be more in touch with nature and or I shouldn't say in touch with nature because I hate the idea that nature is separate, but like how can we live more deeply in our environment but also not go backwards in time in terms of technology, but not turn into like Blade Runner, like cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Cyberpunk is beautiful to look at, but no one wants to live there,
Yeah, it's always a huge element of cyberpunk is dystopia.
Yeah,
Uh,
like the machines took over, like that's not what we want. So I think solar punk is this wonderful blend in between that is very
yeah.
optimistic, very achievable, and like community centered. And that's really, yeah, I could talk about that forever. Love it.
Yeah, and like Axlex was saying, their CSA was working together with local solar cooperatives. So cool. Totally solar punk. On I'll just bring up Greenery real quick because there's a bunch of links here about sort of bio-collaboration and using bioremediation to get rid of like toxic chemicals and stuff by microbes and fungi eating it and like turning fungi into
Yeah,
building materials that eat carbon and like all this sort of like self-healing buildings made of fungi and all this stuff that we can do with the natural world in collaboration, like sort of as a collaboration
totally,
with like
totally,
and
totally. Yeah. So wait, Alex, can I do a quick shameless plug
oh, for
also?
sure. Yeah.
If you go to the Wildgrid website, we just started a solar punk newsletter that will send weekly solar punk stories and technologies of like climate tech and nature. So if you go down to the bottom, I think it should be there. Let's see. There you go. If anyone is
I'm
interested,
losing my
sign up.
mind.
Really,
This is
we're really
amazing.
trying to like rally behind solar punk just as obviously the movement has been around for a while, but just service it so that people know it doesn't have to be climate doom and it doesn't have to be full on rural agriculture. Like there are things in between that we could make possible, but we have to do it together. It's not just going to happen.
I love it. And you make all this stuff so accessible. You're meeting people where they're at. So, beginners guides, all this stuff on Instagram that I showed people before that I think is so useful. It just comes right into your feed and like just all these little daily updates. I wanted to ask you about Climate Week, but I honestly don't have time. But we'll just have to have you on again.
I know,
Next time you have
and
something.
I'm so sorry that I came late.
Oh, it's been a
Mom,
week for both of us. Totally understand. And you're over there walking the walk. That's what you're doing. And you
oh
still
my
made time
gosh,
to show up for us.
it's a
And
lot.
I
Yes,
appreciate
it's
it so much.
we should just do like a maker entrepreneur hour because I have a 6-month-old daughter and that I like thought I was organized until I had a baby and then I was like, whoa, this is hard. So thank you for letting
Extra
me
hard
come in
mode.
late and excited to whoever signs up. I'm excited to talk to you about solar punk.
I just signed up. Everybody else sign up. David, I see you there. You better sign up. I mean, David already
David,
is
I'm gonna
well
look
on
for
this.
you. No, I'm just kidding. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Sweet. Thanks, Krystal. Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome rest of your day.